3 Apache women stood there tall, their muscular arms slick with sweat, clothes torn and stained with blood. The one in front, Sayan, had broad shoulders, a bleeding cut on her arm and eyes sharp as blades, locked straight onto Reed. "We need water," she said, her voice low and raspy, "and a place to rest for the night. If you say no, we will leave. But we will die out there." Noli stood to her right, gripping a broken spear, ready to strike if needed. Tala, the quietest of the 3, simply stared at Reed, her eyes black and unblinking like the night itself. Reed said nothing. His hand hovered near the butt of his gun, sweat running down his spine. These women were not beggars. They stood like stone pillars, waiting for judgment. A gust of hot wind swept across the yard, carrying red dust with it. For a moment, there was only the creak of the gate, and the heavy breathing of the horses tied outside. Reed let go of the gun and pushed the gate fully open. "Come in. Water's in the barrel next to the stable." Sayan gave a single nod and stepped through first. Noli and Tala followed, their shadows stretching behind them like scars across the sunbaked earth. Reed watched them pass, feeling as though he had just opened his door to a summer storm rolling straight into his life. Sayan crouched down and scooped up water, drinking in long, deep gulps. Streams of it ran down her neck and sun-darkened shoulders. Noli dumped a full bucket over her head, letting the dust and blood wash away in one muddy flow. Tala quietly cleaned the gash on her arm, lips pressed so tight they bled. Reed leaned against the porch post, his rifle still within reach. He watched each of them closely, missing nothing. The wounds, the whip marks, the fire in their eyes. None of them were weak. He remembered his years in the army, watching Apache women herded into camps, children chased out of villages. It was those moments that made him walk away from the uniform, choosing instead a quiet life on this hill. He had sworn never to be part of it again. And now here they were standing in his yard. "Where did you come from?" Reed asked, his voice rough with dust. Sen looked up. "From a place that no longer exists," she said. "Our people were ambushed. We have been running for 2 days." Reed said nothing. The answer cut like a blade. He knew what their presence meant. Violence out there was flaring again. And if anyone from town caught sight of them, trouble would hit this ranch faster than a summer storm. Noli stepped forward, locking eyes with Reed. "We are not asking for charity. We will earn our stay. Cleaning, fixing fences, whatever needs doing." Reed glanced toward the sagging cattle pen, the half-collapsed stretch of fence. He had planned to send them away by nightfall, but Nolly's words gave him pause. Finally, Reed gave a nod. "Stay tonight. We will see in the morning." Sayan did not say thank you. She simply signaled for the others to follow her onto the porch. Reed walked into the cabin first, feeling like he had just invited 3 wild lions into a very small cage. Outside, the sun still blazed, but inside the cabin, a quiet storm had just begun. The next morning, golden sunlight poured over the fields like honey. Reed stepped onto the porch, about to take the horse out to pasture, then froze. The 3 women had been up since the sky was still gray. Sayan was pulling the collapsed fence back into place, her muscles rippling beneath layers of dust. Noli swung a hammer, driving stakes into the ground with clean, decisive blows. Tala swept the yard, collecting broken wood and stacking it into neat piles. Reed crossed his arms and watched in silence. The sight was unfamiliar. These same women, who had seemed like wild beasts just last night, were now working as if this were their own land. By midday, they stopped. Shirts soaked in sweat, Reed brought a bucket of water and placed it in the center of the yard. No one said a word. But when their eyes met, the tension from the night before was gone. Lunch was simple beans and bread. Noli chuckled when Tala snuck a bite before sitting at the table. That laugh cracked the heavy silence inside the cabin. In the afternoon, Reed took them to the horse pen and showed them how to retee the roof that had been torn loose by the storm. Sayan worked beside him, the scent of sweat and dry timber thick in the air. Once Reed's hand slipped with the hammer, nearly striking his own foot, but Sayan caught the handle just in time. Their eyes met for a moment. Neither smiled, but neither looked away. A wordless understanding passed between them. By sunset, half the fence had been rebuilt. Reed lit a fire in the yard, letting the 3 women sit around it. The flames cast their shadows onto the cabin wall. 4 figures now, not strangers, but something like a squad sharing one outpost. That night, Reed still kept his rifle within reach, but for the first time, he did not feel the need to load it before sleep. The next day, the sun was still relentless. Reed hauled wood down to the creek to cut new posts. Sayan followed him, an axe in one hand, her stride steady as if exhaustion had never touched her. They worked in silence. Only the sharp crack of axe against wood echoed across the clearing. When they paused to rest, Reed handed C in a canteen. She looked up, sweat running down her sunburned cheek. Their eyes met in silence. Then she drank deeply and returned the canteen with a small nod. "You were a soldier?" she asked, her voice low. Reed nodded, not lifting his gaze. "Left the army 3 years ago. I had seen enough of blood-soaked raids." Sayan was quiet for a long time before replying softly. "My husband died in an ambush. We did not strike first." Reed's hand stopped mid-motion, his eyes dimming. There was no need to say more. Each understood the weight the other carried. That afternoon, Nolly and Tala reorganized the dry goods shed. Nolly found an old dust-covered guitar and strummed a few rusty strings out of curiosity. The ragged sound made all three burst out laughing. Even Tala, usually the quiet one, smiled for the first time since arriving. Dinner that evening felt strangely warm. Nolly shared stories from her childhood in the village. Sayan said little, just listened quietly, though now and then her eyes drifted toward Reed. After night fell, Reed stepped out onto the porch alone to watch the stars. Sayan joined him, standing beside him in silence. They stood there for a long time with only the sound of crickets and night insects filling the space between them. "Tomorrow we can leave if you want us to," Sayan said slowly. Reed stared out over the dark field. "If you leave, you will not make it to the border. Stay until the storm passes." Sayan did not reply, but she pulled up a chair and sat beside him. That night, Reed did not feel like the cabin was empty anymore. It felt like a fire had been lit again, like a soldier's camp rebuilt from ashes. "Thank you for being here. If this story reminded you of the old days, dusty afternoons, and the sound of hooves echoing in your heart, then subscribe to my channel so that each day we can sit together again, and I will tell you another story from the Wild West." 3 days later, red dust suddenly swirled along the main road. A lone rider on horseback headed straight for the gate. The patrol officer with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low and a silver badge gleaming in the sun halted. His cold eyes sweeping across the ranch. "Callahan," he said with a curt nod. "Word is you have some strangers here. You know the town's order. Anyone caught harboring Apache will be fined or jailed." Reed leaned casually on the gate, his voice steady. "It is just me and the cattle here. If you see any Apache, go ahead and shoot." The officer narrowed his eyes as if weighing the situation. His gaze drifted toward the cattle pen where Nolly and Tala waited in the shadows. Spears gripped tight. A soft horse's whinny made him glance sideways, but Reed stepped into his line of sight, never breaking eye contact. The silence stretched tight as wire. Then the officer spat onto the dirt. "Watch yourself, Callahan. Do not make me come back." He turned his horse and rode off. Only when he was out of sight did Sayan step out from behind the haste, sweat glistening on her forehead. "He knows," she said. Reed nodded. "And he will be back." That afternoon he walked the perimeter of the ranch, checking the fences, scanning for anything out of place. On the eastern edge, he found fresh hoof prints, at least 3 horses pressed deep into the dry ground. Someone had been watching. By evening, the air inside the cabin was heavy as stone. Tala sharpened her spear. Nolly refitted old arrowheads. Reed cleaned his rifle, oiling each piece with care. "If they come back tomorrow," Nolly began. "Tomorrow," Reed cut in, his voice low. "We stand our ground. No one runs anymore." The firelight flickered across the faces of the 3 women. There was no fear in their eyes now, only readiness. That night, for the first time since they arrived, the cabin door was locked tight. Outside, the summer wind kicked up clouds of dust, as if warning that a sandstorm was near. At dawn the next day, the air was thick and stifling. Reed rose early, silently carrying a box of ammunition out into the yard. He loaded each bullet into leather pouches, then hung the rifle on the wall near the door. Sayan stepped onto the porch, her hair loose, the wound on her shoulder still wrapped. She glanced at the fresh sandbags stacked around the windows, her voice low like a passing wind. "You planning to turn this place into a fortress?" Reed did not look back. "I am planning to make it a home, and a home should be defended." The answer silenced all 3 women. Nolly squinted as if making sure he was not joking. Tala set her makeshift spear against the wall, picked up a hammer, and began reinforcing stakes around the cattle pen. By noon, they worked without rest. Sayan boarded up the windows with thick planks. Nolly strung rope for traps. Tala coated sharpened stakes with pine resin. If anyone tried to charge in on horseback, they would bleed. Reed dug shallow pits along the fence line, burying steel spikes beneath a thin layer of sand. That afternoon, Reed handed Cyan an old revolver. "You know how to use one." Cyan gripped the handle, squinted down the sights, and pulled the trigger. The bullet slammed into a tin can 10 paces away. Reed gave a small nod. "That will do." As the sun set, the four of them sat around a fire in the yard. No one spoke, only the crackling of wood filled the silence. The wind stirred, lifting the dust like wandering ghosts. Finally, Reed spoke, "If any of you wants to leave, now is the time. Tonight, if they return, there will be blood." Cyan stared at him, then stood up. "If we leave, we will spend the rest of our lives running. We stay because here at least we get to fight." Reed nodded, something different flickering in his eyes. "Then tonight, we keep watch together." They took shifts on guard. As night settled over the ranch, the small homestead looked like an outpost at the edge of a war zone, silent but ready. Midnight, a blood-red moon hung heavy over the hills. In the distance, the sound of horse hooves drifted in,